Hello everyone that's decided to watch this video. I just thought I'd film a short little video. Me and my friend Daz Bond have come down today to the lovely building that's behind me, which is Tollerton Hall in Nottinghamshire, and during the Second World War it was home to the 507th Parachute Infantry Regiment, who were during Dday here were attached to the 82nd Airborne Division. It's a bit windy, it's a bit nippy, so if you can't hear me very well I apologise. We've come down here today because it's just been bought out by new owners. It was owned by the same person for a long time, and back in 2013 when I did my memorial project to build the memorial to the 507th across the road from the hall, the owners there were very receptive, and we spent a lot of time here digging on the old campsite and also looking around in the quite splendid building itself. However, back then we were pretty limited in terms of how much we could look around the hall itself, because it was operated under a lease, I believe, by an insurance firm, and they got a lot of classified information on there, so we weren't allowed to look around too much. But since it's sold, we thought we'd take the opportunity to try and get to know the new owners and to see what their plans for the hall are for the near future. And I've got to say, they're very positive. They're really keen on history for a start, which is great. The son in particular seems to have quite a decent knowledge of the Second World War. They've got no plans of developing the land or the old campsite, which is great. So you know, it's all very positive. So I thought, whilst I've got the opportunity to sort of come out on this day, it's a nice day, it's a bit chilly, but it's a nice day, it's not raining for a start, to come out and give a bit of the brief history of the hall. So those who are fairly knowledgeable on the 82nd Airborne Division know that the 507th were attached to the division for Operation Neptune, or in other words, the invasion of Normandy, which is most commonly referred to now as D-Day. They were one of two regiments that made up part of the 2nd Airborne Brigade, the other one being the 508th Parachute Infantry Regiment, and together they moved over to England in March 1944, having been stationed temporarily in Northern Ireland. So the 507th were moved here to Tollerton Hall, and the 508th were moved to the perhaps even slightly more splendid location of Tollerton Park in Nottinghamshire. So the reasons really were that the 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment, which was one of the original member regiments of the 82nd Airborne Division, had been left behind in Anzio, fighting there, and as a result of this they didn't arrive in the UK until April 1944, which was well, not only was it 2 months after the remainder of the division had arrived in England, but not only that, the remainder of the division also spent nearly 2 months in Northern Ireland, so they'd had long periods of rest and rehabilitation that the 504th just wouldn't be afforded when they got back to England. So Ridgway, being the sensible the general that he was, had already sort of consciously made the decision pretty early on that when the 504th did arrive in England, that they would not be in a usable condition to take part on D-Day. Around about the same time that the 2nd Airborne Brigade, including the 507 and the 508, were moving back from, were transferring overseas from America, the 101st Airborne Division was moving overseas to campsites down in the Wiltshire area, and they were made up of two sort of parent regiments, which was the 502nd and the 506th. Now they had a third regiment attached, which was the 501st, which was many people sort of refer to as the bastard regiment of the division. They were never really seen to be a permanent addition to the division, and therefore sort of got treated sort of substandardly by some of the high-ranking officers in the 101st. But anyway, that's a different story. So they were being prepared for D-Day, and of course, because of the pending operation, they had got 3 parachute regiments and 1 glider infantry regiment. Now for the 82nd, on the other hand, when they arrived in England, because the 504th was left in Italy, they were left with 1 parachute regiment, which was the 505th, and as inexperienced as they were, the 82nd could not possibly consider entering combat with just 1 parachute regiment and 1 glider infantry regiment. Now when the 507th and the 508th arrived in the UK, it was probably only a case of it being an idea that they would be attached on a semi-permanent / permanent basis to the 82nd. They knew that if both regiments were attached to the 82nd, that when the 504th was back in a condition where it could start fighting again, one of them would have to be moved on. So when they arrived in the Nottinghamshire area in March 44, they were both attached to the 82nd. And as I say, the 507th will move to this location here. And if I spin round, you've got the hall there, and then just through the trees here, the big field behind me there is where the entire campsite, where all the pyramid tents that the men of the 507th lived in was located. It stretches back quite a way. So the enlisted men and the NCOs were in camp tented accommodation, standard US Army tentage for the time, pyramid tents, 6 man to a tent, and then they would have a wood or coal burning stove centrally in the middle of the tent. The problem that the Americans had early doors was that the campsite's pathways were made out of crushed coal. Now the problem when you utilise crushed coal as pathways is that when you have a campsite being established in March 1944 in England, which is not very warm at the best of times, especially for Americans who are used to warmer climates, those coal pathways aren't going to last very long. Each tent was given a bucket of coal a day to warm the tent, and that was it. So that one bucket of coal was supposed to keep the tent warm enough overnight whilst they were asleep, and excuse me, and the chances of actually doing that were pretty slim. You imagine nowadays being given a bucket of coal to keep your 3-bed house warm overnight, you'd struggle. So keeping a canvas tent overnight that's got, holes in it, gaps in it, round the side, it's got a draft, it ain't going to happen. So you can imagine that the crushed coal pathways that had been built by engineers when they were building the campsite, they didn't last very long at all. So eventually they ended up paving some of the roadways and the pathways in between to make it less of a quagmire, to make it less muddy. As you can imagine, you've got nearly 2,000 odd guys walking up and down inside a tented camp, and it soon becomes a bit of a Somme-like environment. So that was what the living conditions were like. The officers themselves, well, they had the honour of living in there, so slightly different for them. They've got really comfortable living conditions compared to some of the other regiments in the 82nd, who 505th for example, whose officers were in tented accommodation. Excuse me. The ability to live inside of Tollerton Hall is pretty incredible. You've got to remember as well that you're talking about history that the Americans just simply aren't used to. It's a building that at the time they arrived was hundreds of years old, and when they first arrived here, obviously it would be impossible to gauge the percentage if it did, but many of them were of the belief that they were billeted in Nottingham Castle. They wake up the morning after they arrived here. They arrived here in the darkness hours in March, having been trucked from a train station after having endured a lengthy train ride from Scotland, and that was before moving over from Ireland. When they arrived here, it was pitch black. They couldn't see a lot. There's officers running around all over the place, hollering, telling them where to go, telling them where the tents are. They're all very knackered, so they all get in bed, and they wake up the following morning, and what they see is that, and they see all this greenery and all this beautiful landscape around them, and they're only going to assume one thing if you tell them they're in Nottinghamshire, and that is that they're at Nottingham Castle, which obviously we know isn't the case. But you can see why they thought it, and the same could probably be said for the guys in the 508th who were based at Woollerton Park. If you don't know what Woollerton Park or Woollerton Hall looks like, Google it. Incredible building, the sort of thing that you would film a period drama in. Beautiful landscapes, deer roaming all over the place, and almost like a part of a clock face. The campsite had a sort of segregated area that was fenced off, and for the Americans that were based there, it must have been an absolutely incredible sight the morning after they arrived. to see where they'd been billeted, they probably couldn't believe their eyes. But anyway, so the 507th were here from March until the last sort of few days of May 1944, at which point the US Army Signal Corps came to town, and the US Army Signal Corps were tasked with filming their embarkation. So from a few days before they left, they filmed platoons out on patrol in the local countryside. They filmed the regiment preparing all its gear. They filmed them getting on board not only US Army trucks, but also the Barton Bus Company, which they had rented in its entirety for the day in order to help transfer the personnel over to the embarkation airfields at Fullbeck and Barkston Heath. And then they filmed them preparing all their gear at the airfield, test firing weapons, all sorts of footage was filmed in those days leading up to the 507th vacating Barkston Heath and Fullbeck for drop zones, or for a drop zone near Amfreville in Normandy. The combat side of what happened to the 507th in Normandy is another story entirely, which many people probably know about. The massacres that were endured by them at Hammerby and Grenier, for example, being of particular note. But yeah, an incredible place for them to live, and that footage is really worth a watch. If you've never seen the Critical Past footage, well, I say Critical Past, it's on their website, www.criticalpast.com. Filmed by the Signal Corps in May and June 1944. Go and have a look. It's commonly miscaptioned as being the 505th, but take it from me, it was all filmed here at Tollerton Hall in Nottinghamshire as the 507th Parachute Infantry Regiment left for their embarkation airfields at Fullbeck and Barkston Heath. Now I'm going to quickly try and foxtrot over here because I want to talk about another story whilst I've got the chance. We've been given the opportunity by new owners to go up into the upstairs windows that are behind the balcony that used to be over what was the coach entrance to the hall way back when it was a country home. And the reason I wanted to do that was because one of the officers that vacated Barkston Heath, vacated Tollerton Hall for RAF Fullbeck at the end of May 1944 was Lieutenant Colonel Edwin Ostberg, who was the 1st Battalion commanding officer at the time. He was seriously wounded on the bridge at Chef du Pont. He was shot through the chest, suffered a collapsed lung, and was pulled from the river below, the Murderay River below, by a guy called Robert Van Atter, who kindly gave me some thoughts on his time at Tollerton for my book. Now the reason that I mention him is because after Edwin Ostberg recovered from his wounds, he was basically told that because he'd suffered a collapsed lung, he couldn't be in the airborne anymore. So, well, certainly not in the parachute forces anymore. So he was sent back to the ZI, the Zone of Interior in the States, for a bit of a boring administrative role. He got bored, and he ended up writing a letter to James Gavin, who at the time had been, given command of the 82nd Airborne Division, asking him if there was any roles within the division that he could basically have. He ended up becoming the commanding officer of the 2nd Battalion of the 325th Glider Infantry Regiment, and unfortunately he was killed in February 1945 by trying to man a machine gun on the top of a German tank, very similarly to the whole Audie Murphy story. But anyway, again, the reason that I bring him up was because in August 1944, the 507th were transferred to the 17th Airborne Division, and their time at Tollerton Hall came to an end because they were moved to the Wiltshire area, to a little village called Barton Stacey, where a new campsite was. Now, prior to that actually happening, when Edwin Ostberg had been informed that he was no longer allowed to remain in command of the 1st Battalion of the 507th, he wanted to address his men, and he wanted to address them all in one go. He wanted to say goodbye properly. So he ordered that every single member of his battalion that was available at the time, so you've got to remember many were still wounded, many were still in hospitals, gathered out here. Now at the time this was a big circular driveway. It's been grassed over now, and there's a small tarmac car park in front of the hall, but at the time it was a big gravel circular driveway. Now what Edwin Osberg did was he climbed on the balcony that you can see behind me over my shoulder, and as his men were gathered where I'm standing now, he addressed them all, and he said his goodbyes to them all. I imagine it was probably quite an emotional moment for him, because he'd commanded that battalion from training all the way back to when the regiment was formed in the States. So the men meant a huge deal to him. So he really did want to, you know, say goodbye properly, and I imagine that was probably quite an emotional moment for him. Now in 2013, when we carried out the memorial project to build the memorial, as I mentioned earlier, across the road, we invited Betsy Ostberg, who is Edwin Ostberg's daughter. She was a baby at the time he was killed in action. She knew nothing of her dad growing up other than the odd story, so she spent most of her life trying to research him. And we brought her here in 2013, and she had the opportunity to see that balcony for herself and to see where her dad once stood to address his battalion. And by all accounts, Edwin Osberg was a pretty incredible officer. He was more than a leader, which is ultimately what ended up getting him killed in the first place, because you know, a man of his rank should never have been climbing on board a tank to operate a machine gun. It should have been somebody else. But anyway, that's the sort of guy he was. It was the reason he got wounded as well at Chef Dupont, was because he was leading one of the charges across the bridge when he got shot. So, but again, that's a different story. So I just thought I'd film a quick video whilst I was out here, because we've had a pretty decent morning here this morning at Tollerton Hall. It all sounds very positive for the future for the hall. It doesn't sound as though the land is going to get used for development of new houses, which is something that from past meetings with the parish council was certainly a concern. The new owners are in the sports supercar sales business, so we'll be turning part of the hall that was built in the 60s, or sorry, in the 50s by the previous owners, as part of a showroom for supercars, and this is where they'll be selling supercars. So the guy that owns it now loves the seclusion. He loves the fact that there is not another house. You know, you couldn't shout towards another house from where you are here, and they want to keep it this way, which is great. The fact that they're also really into their history is another good thing, because it means that they might be tempted to in the future consider the protection of property and not want to, you know, turn it into new builds, which is at the moment the way things are going in this country, although it's a necessity. So one other thing I just wanted to point out is the fact that if you want to know more about the 507th time at Tollerton Hall, go and buy my book, please. It's available from the publisher's website, which is www.overlord-publishing.com. It covers the history of the entire division's time spent, sorry about the noisy plane, spent in England during the Second World War. So all of the infantry regiments, the 505th, 504th, 507th, 508th and the 325th Glider Infantry Regiment are all detailed in the book, as well as all of the subunits of the division that were camped in areas like Husbands Bosworth, Market Harborough, Papillon Hall. Beautiful locations, lots of original unpublished photos in there. So if you're into your 80-second history and you want something a bit different, then my book's available at the publisher's website. I'm also currently working on another book, in fact a series of 3 volumes about 9 Troop Carrier Command with my friend Hans Denbrock. So if you have any information at all that you feel is worth sharing about the troop carrier groups of the 9th Air Force during the Second World War that carried the paratroopers to combat, please don't hesitate to contact me. That'd be great. Hope you enjoyed the video. See you later.